So the law hasn't really been able to address the fact of what happens. There's not a new law that comes up about a person who puts something on a social network, social media. But what the lawyers have done, the lawyers who are trying to advance the law, and in this case, the person who represents the lady who got hit by my secretary is going to come back and doesn't want the secretary's assets. They want my assets. They want the law firm's assets and our insurance policy because we are the proverbial deep pocket, and in her case, the deeper pocket. So what do we do in the law? We try to borrow. We try to borrow one circumstance and apply it to another when we don't have it. If any of your family members or your children or whatever, friends have gone to law school, one of the things, the reason why we go to law school is there was a movie out many, many years ago called Paper Chase. I don't know if you've ever seen it. But this was a story about a first-year law student's experiences at Harvard. And the old professor comes up. His name was Kingsley. And he comes up and he's got a whole audience of first-year law students who are all shaking in their pants. It's a very scary first day of law school. I still wake up. Here I am 30 years past that. Honest to God, I tell you the truth, I still have nightmares about that first day. It was just the most scary and intimidating thing. I mean, I'd rather have, root canal and all, 36, how many teeth do I have? 36, 32? Without Novocaine than go through that again. But the point of the story is that this Professor Kingsfield gets in front of everybody and says, listen, you walked in here with a head full of mush, and you're going to walk out thinking like a lawyer. And the process is that we sit through years and years and years of law school, reading case after case after case, because the value of a lawyer is to predict what your circumstances are. You come into a lawyer's office and you say, look, I'm coming to you because I have a particular issue. You tell the lawyer your side of the story, and what do you expect? You expect the lawyer to give you an answer. Hey, this is what I predict will happen based upon your circumstances. And that's the value of law school. Now, translate that into the practical problem of social networking. We don't have law on the subject. So what we lawyers do is we're going to take and analogize the circumstance of my secretary getting involved in a car accident while she's on task for me. And we're going to say, listen, because the employer is on the hook for that, well, in the event of social networking and a faux pas that takes place, the employer is on the hook for that. Is there a law in the books that says that? No. But that's where the law has to react to it. We have to borrow from what is and try to morph it into what it needs to be, what it needs to be. So, getting back to the point, one of the issues is that you need to absolutely have a policy. Now, a policy is an all nice and well thing to have, but you know what? If you're ever involved in a litigation, and what we do all the time are litigate cases, when people get on the witness stand and their cross-examination, I mean, you think about Law and Order on television stuff, when you're being cross-examined, you got this nasty lawyer up there, sticking his or her finger in your face and trying to make you like a nervous wreck. Well, that's what we do. And as we point our fingers in people's faces and say, well, did you ever read the policy? And what happens when the person says, well, I never read it. But it was there, wasn't it? Yeah, it was there. And then they go back to the employer and say, what did you do? What did you do to make sure that employee really read it and understood it? So having the policy is part A. Part B is training, is making sure that your employees understand the policy. And my suggestion is that you train the current group of people within your world. You videotape that training experience, and every time you have a new employee come, instead of having to bring people in again, you just have them part of their orientation sit through this video. Now, let me analogize this. In one of the hottest areas in the law over the last 10 years, anybody want to guess? What is the most prolific part of litigation? Want to guess?
Copyright enforcement.
Close, but not right there. A little bit more provocative. in the workplace litigation. Sexual harassment. That is the number one area where employers are being sued more than any other area. And so what was taking place is that the law took a while. It took almost 10 years for the law to catch up with this. It's amazing. But finally, when the law caught up with it, it said to employers, listen, unless you have a policy and unless you train people, if you have a person who acts inappropriately in the workplace, typically, it's not all the time, but typically it's a man who's acting inappropriately towards a woman. If you have that in your workplace and you haven't had a policy in place and you haven't actually trained people on it, the employer is responsible. The flip of that is this. If you have a policy and if you train people, the employer is 100% insulated from liability. 100%. Think about that. There's very few things in the law where a lawyer can say to you, if you do A, B, and C, I can guarantee you, you won't lose a lawsuit, no matter what. And I'm suggesting to you that that may very well be the same course that's taking place in the law as it relates to social media. If you have a policy in place about the things that people can say and do through social media as it relates to their time during the workplace, and if you sit down with your employees and coworkers and say, look, this is a brand new area. It's unfettered territory. But all of you need to know that we have a policy in this company, and again, large or small, about what to do and what not to do. So that's the second to-do thing that you have to consider as you leave here and think about how you want to take some of the comments we are making today and implement them. Another thing that you need to take into consideration is what do you do when a person says, you know, I appreciate the fact that you don't want me to do it on my work time. So, okay, fine, I'm not going to do that. But I have a right, don't I, under the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, to be able to express my opinion. Well, now comes the 800-pound legal gorilla, because now the law starts going into the nervous and jerky stuff, because now, oh my God, what do? We've got somebody who says First Amendment rights, which we all say, look, it's the First Amendment, which obviously means it's the first thing that the framers of the Constitution thought about. So it's the first thing, and it's the thing that has to get balanced against the rights of the employer in terms of what to say. Now, if you want to get out there and say something about somebody or some product or whatever, you have to be leery of the fact of what's going to end up happening. Are you going to go too far? And that's one of the debates that the legal community is struggling with these days, because how to create a balance, how do you strike a balance between your First Amendment rights to be able to express your opinion and say whatever you want, whenever you want, against the responsibilities that we all have as citizens in this changing world that we have. Now, of course, we know one good thing is that First Amendment rights do have limitations. You know that, and there's that, if you've never heard about it, but the most famous case with respect to this is the individual who goes into a crowded movie theater. Of course, movie theater lets you know that this thing goes back a few years. Goes into a movie theater and screams, fire. And the person gets prosecuted and turns around and says, look, First Amendment rights. And they say, oh, no. Doesn't go that far. First Amendment rights does not allow you to hurt other people, put other people at risk. And I suggest to you that some of the literature now, that's where the same kind of analogy, since we don't have a law in place now to deal with this. Just like I said about we borrowed from the secretary who was on the street and how we're borrowing now in sexual harassment to protect an employer by having a policy and training, I believe here too we're going to have a borrowing of that same concept where people just can't say whatever they want and get away with it just because they're saying it's their First Amendment rights. And so